Dogs pretty much will eat anything if they fall on the floor. So it's really important to be aware of what your dog eats because certain things that you eat can be very harmful, if not fatal, to your dogs. So I wanted to create this video on the 10 things that you definitely need to be aware of if you have a dog, because if you drop some food on the floor, you need to know if it's poisonous or not. Certain things that are not poisonous to us are poisonous to dogs simply because their metabolism is a little bit different. Let's talk about number one, avocados. There's a certain natural fungicide in avocados called persin, which is in the leaves. It's in the outer skin as well as the pit. And our bodies have an enzyme to break it down, but dogs don't. So if they're exposed to this, it can create some digestive issues. It can create some heart problems. It can even increase fluid around their heart. So if you see your dog chewing on an avocado, definitely get it out of his mouth. There's a little bit of this fungicide in the actual avocado meat, but it's very, very minor. All right, number two, caffeine. Now, caffeine is in soda, tea, coffee, even some in chocolate. And a dog's digestive system absorbs caffeine very, very rapidly. So it could start to increase the pulse rate and create arrhythmias. And if in large amounts, even a seizure. Now, I know my dog will definitely consume coffee if we leave it around, but there are some variables like the size of your dog, how much they consume. But usually within 2 hours, they're going to be excessively thirsty. And you may even see a lack of coordination because it affects their nervous system. All right, number three, the actual chocolate that has the caffeine. Chocolate also has another stimulant called theobromine. And so the darker the chocolate, the more unsweetened it is, the more toxic this is to your dogs, especially if they get a hold of baker's chocolate. It can lead to heart problems and even a heart attack. And many times a vet will see a spike in chocolate poisoning during holidays where people are eating more chocolate. So just make sure your chocolate is well hidden from these dogs. All right, number four, grapes or raisins. Believe it or not, there's a chemical, tartaric acid, in grapes and raisins that is pretty toxic to dogs. And just a handful will create a very negative reaction. It could lead to extreme thirst and eventually kidney failure. But again, it does depend on the size of your dog as well as how much they consume. All right, number five, alcohol. You do not want to give your dog alcohol. They cannot tolerate it, even in tiny amounts. Some of the symptoms might include fatigue, lowered body temperature, they get colder, and you may find that they lose muscle coordination. And a significant amount will be fatal. All right, number six, salt. Now, this might be surprising, but salt can be pretty toxic, especially if it's more than 4 grams per kilogram in weight. But you usually see this in dogs eating nuts, like salty nuts, salty popcorn, salty chips that are laying around. I know this might be surprising, but dogs have the ability to rip open a bag of chips and eat the whole thing in one sitting. So this excess salt can lead to a condition called hypernatremia. That's too much sodium in the blood, and they can have edema, which is swelling in the brain, and even tremors or a fever. All right, the next one, number seven, is uncooked dough. Now, of course, if you've been watching my YouTube channel, you don't have to worry about this because you're not going to be eating dough or making things out of dough. But if you have dough that you're making bread with and it has yeast in it and the dog eats it, the dough can very easily in their stomachs, which is nice and warm, start creating an excess amount of fermentation and not only generate a lot of gas, but a lot of ethanol as an alcohol, which will create severe toxicity and alcohol poisoning. All right, number eight, and you probably already know this one, but you never want to expose your dogs to xylitol, which is an alternative sweetener that you use on the ketogenic diet. This can be deadly because what happens, it can severely drop your dog's blood sugars way down, and that can lead to coma, seizures, liver damage, and even death. All right, number nine, garlic, onions, and chives. The sulfur compounds in these vegetables can affect the red blood cells and create anemia. And your dog potentially could need a blood transfusion if they consume a lot of it and they're a small dog. All right, and number 10, the seeds from apples, cherries, apricots, peaches, and plums. The seeds in these fruits have cyanide. Now, your dog would have to chew them up because if they swallow them, they're not going to get much cyanide. They'd have to chew on it. And the cyanide could be released and it could be very, very deadly to your dog. The symptoms would be difficulty breathing and eventually convulsions. And you might also notice that their gums become very, very red because the body is starving for oxygen. Now, since we're on the topic of dogs, I created a very interesting video on should your dog do intermittent fasting? Check that out. I put it right here.